everybody, thanks for joining me here today. This is Nicole with Topaz, and today we're going to be going over how Topaz Clarity can help enhance your HDR or tone mapped images. So we have found that clarity is a really good complement to HDR or tone mapped images because of the fine-tune control that you have with your micro, low, medium, and high contrasts. You have very specific control over certain areas in your image that might need a little bit of help when you're working with HDR tone mapped images, specifically mid-tone contrast enhancements. Additionally, we have a halo-free and noise-free algorithm that will help you enhance your image without having to worry about that most common problem or flaw that's going to be present when you're processing HDR images, and that is going to be enhancing those halos that start to happen. So with Clarity, you can rest assured that you're not necessarily going to be adding those into the program like you might in other programs. So it gives you a very natural and consistent feel to the image while still giving you a high dynamic range within your photo. So let's go ahead and jump on into the program and look at some of these images. So I think the first thing we'll go ahead and talk about is just the quality of Topaz Clarity versus some other tools, even some of our own tools within our lineup, which are best used for other things. So this image that we're looking at right now is actually an HDR image. It was merged together with HDR Pro within Photoshop CS6. And when that happens, I played with it just a little bit, but we were able to bring out a lot of the shadow detail, close up a lot of the highlights, and it looks really well balanced. Definitely has a high dynamic range within this image, and it's starting to give it a little bit more of that HDR type of look, get a little bit stylized, and the saturation was increased as well, just so you know that did happen. So if I was to take this in, sometimes we encourage people to go into Topaz Adjust, which is one of our programs that we use to create pseudo HDR type of images. It's what we use to basically tone map your image and really work with the local exposure to create HDR-like feelings. If you take an image that has already been processed as an HDR into Topaz Labs or into Topaz Adjust, you might run into a couple issues just because you've already gone through that HDR process. A couple of those issues might include halos that start to really get enhanced along the bright edges of the or high contrast edges, such as against the sky and the building. You might also start to see some artifacts that appear in really smooth areas like skies and skin that you have to kind of work with just a little bit more within the program. It's pretty easy, and I'm going to show you both ways of doing it. However, if you don't want to add any more stylization to this image, Topaz Clarity is going to be the best one to get that mid-tone contrast that you might be after, that you might have lost during that merge, without adding any more stylization. So let's go ahead and take this into Topaz Clarity first. I'm using CS6 here today. If you're unfamiliar with our compatibility requirements, you can take a look at that on our site. But we are compatible with Photoshop, Photoshop Elements, Lightroom, Aperture, iPhoto, PaintShop Pro, Photo Effects Lab, our own host software, and others as well. So you can check that out, but I am using CS6 here today, so I'm just going to go Topaz Labs, Topaz Clarity. And I'll just pop right on into the program. It's loading some of these presets that we have here available for you. I'm going to go ahead and press Reset All in this bottom right corner just to get us back to a default position to the original image. If you are not familiar with Topaz Clarity, I'll go over it really quick, but it's more specific to the tools today. The ones we're going to be going over more specific to how you would work with your HDR and tone mapped images. So over here on the left, we do have our collections, which are going to be breaking all of the presets that we have available for you down into different genres. So for this particular image, I might go to the architecture collection and check out all the different presets I have available there. Maybe something like the brick building is going to be a good preset for me. I click on that and it's applied to the image. Here's before here's after. Really brings out the detail within all those bricks, but again, still keeps your flat areas very natural, texture looking good, and you do not see any halo starting to appear against this gray sky. So that's really top quality that we're looking at right now. If you scroll over all these presets on the left-hand side, you'll see the little preset pop-up fly out, and you can just decide which one you like the best. Maybe exterior texture is going to be something you like more. Click on that. Here's before. Here's after. And if you want to see all of those presets within the actual collection together, you can click on the preset quick look grid, and you can just click on this little grid icon over to the right of the word presets. If you click on that, all of the presets within that architecture collection will pop up into this grid, and you can just compare and contrast and say, you know what, I actually kind of like this, maybe this smooth exterior texture, what's happening there. Click on that, and it's applied to your image. You have the ability to add, delete, import, and export your user-made presets. You can also take snapshots. That's the little snapshot icon over here to the lower right. Your menu is going to be your where your preferences are located. Here you can turn on and off those little preset flyouts. You can turn on and off your tooltips, some other preferences as well. This is where you enter your key, and we have all sorts of support materials here for you as well. Here in the middle of the program is where your main preview is going to be. You can click or you can toggle between before and after with your space bar. You can also do it with your left mouse button. Or you can come up to this lower or this upper left-hand corner, look at your before and after by just clicking on the before and after icon. You'll see your before on your left, your after on your right. Then you have your main icon to the left of that, so you can get back to your main image view. You have your zoom tools here for you. When you're working on certain types of images, it's really important to be able to look at your image quickly at 1:1. So we have a 1:1 icon that will get you to 100% very quickly. We also have a fit icon right next to that, and then your general zoom in and zoom out tools. You can change your background color by clicking on the little light bulb icon in the top right, and you can get rid of the side panels. Let's say you don't actually like working with presets and you'd prefer just working with your right hand side. If you click the little arrows, it will get rid of your side panels, allowing you to have more room within your preview area to actually look at your image. So if you scroll in, it will start to fill into that entire area. Let me go back to fit. We'll bring that panel back because I do like the presets. All right, over here on the right hand side we have our navigator. As you scroll in, you'll see that the blue box will appear, allowing you to drag that around, and it applies to your main preview. You have your loop tool. When you click on your loop tool, a small box will appear within your image, and that is going to allow you to drag wherever you want to see that particular area at 100%, and you'll see that in your upper right hand corner with that loop tool. Go back to fit and go back to navigator. We also have a mask tool which will pop up when you're into your individual masking modules, and it's just going to show you what your mask looks like as you work with it. Lastly, we do have our histogram tool as well, which will show you how your tones are being applied to your image, and you can really see if there are certain areas that are being clipped or blocked up within that histogram. All right, back in the navigator, let's go ahead and start talking about the tools that are going to be really helpful for you. We're going to be spending most of our time today within the dynamics and tone level areas of this program, which is under your clarity group. We have two groups, clarity, hue, saturation, and luminance. And clarity is where you're going to find all of the different contrast controls that are available for you. Let me go ahead and press reset all in this lower left or lower right corner. There we go. Within the dynamics group is where you're going to see all of those different contrast controls, micro, low, medium, and high. One of the biggest questions that we have about Topaz Clarity is, well, what does this all really mean? And I go over it more specifically. I went over quite a lot last week when we were talking about mastering Topaz Clarity, but I do want to cover this again because the mid-tone contrast control is really what's important within this particular program. Let me go, as we're playing with this, I'll come down to this lower area. All right. So the micro contrast is going to control a very small contrast within your image. It's basically going to control the even areas that have almost no you don't think there's any contrast there. Like for example, where my hand is right now over here on this more beige colored wall, there's very limited amounts of contrast there. But if you take your micro contrast up, you'll see that contrast is really starting to be pulled out of areas even as limited contrast as that had in the original. Here's before, here's after. Really starts to pull that out. And it pulls it out within all of the other textures and areas within your image as well. So this is for very, like I said, small variations of contrast. The low contrast adjusts the contrast in areas still where there's not a lot of difference in luminance, but it's not going to be as texture dependent, or it's not going to be as small of variations as the micro. So you can kind of work with your low contrast, and it's going to affect a lot of the image, but you're not worrying about, let's see, this beige area over here to the left. That's not being affected right now. But you see the larger areas that have a little, or not larger, I'm sorry, the areas that have a little bit more larger variations of contrast will still be affected. And this is really important for your mid-tone contrast, which is what we're going to be talking about all day today. Then we have our medium contrast. This is going to adjust the areas of the image where you have a little bit more difference in luminance in this original image between your subjects. So you'll see as we take this up, it's going to be more specific to those areas that already have a lot of contrast between them. Here's before, here's after. So these areas of texture on the wall that had lower contrast variations are not being affected at all. And now if we go to our high contrast, that's going to be even more just about our brightest areas and our shadow areas that get affected. So you can really pinpoint the exact areas that you want to adjust. And one of the things that a lot of HDR photographers will talk about when they talk about post-processing their HDR images is mid-tone contrast. And it takes a little bit of time to pinpoint that mid-tone contrast and work on that without affecting other areas of contrast in your image. What makes Topaz Clarity so great is you can just come in and say, you know what, I want to add a little bit of mid-tone contrast with my medium here, maybe my little bit of low, a little bit more. Here we go. Here's before. Here's after. You've kind of eliminated the area that becomes a little foggy in those shadows whenever you go through merging your HDR. And that's not a huge problem, but it's definitely, again, something that a lot of HDR photographers will work on when post-processing in that within Photoshop or their host program. Within Clarity, you can just come in, pop that in. Click on that again here. Here's before. And you can kind of see down here in the bush, in the vine areas, in the darker windows. It almost looks like there's a little bit of a haze on there, and that's just because of that photo merge. Well, you can come in and bring back that mid-tone contrast without affecting all of this other contrast that you might not want to. And the kicker is when you take it all the way up and you look at really high contrast edges such as the building against the sky, you're not seeing any sort of halos or artifacts appearing in these smooth areas. And that's a really pretty awesome thing actually because I find that when I'm working with even tone mapped images, it's with these really high contrast edges, it's really difficult not to get some sort of halo in there. Now, if you're new to HDR, you might not know what a halo really is. Basically, halos occur at these really high contrast edges, and you'll see some sort of slight glowing effect happening on the lighter edges, such as the sky. You might see a little bit more white along the edge as it hits the building. And along the building, you'd probably see a little bit of a glow of a darker. And that's just the technology of when you're using the pseudo HDR tone mapping, you'll start to see that happening. So, and you really have to control it within HDR programs. Well, here you can quickly come in and just add in exactly what you want and not have to worry about it. So let me take a couple other images in. And actually, I did tell you I would take this into Adjust as well. Topaz Adjust actually is a really amazing program. It's kind of our flagship program here. And it will help to create pseudo HDR type images from a single image. So you can start to get that tone mapped feeling. So within the HDR collection, you can actually come in and add a little bit of a HDR effect. Sorry, that might be a little too heavy. Go to medium. But as you can see, as we go in one-to-one to check out what it's actually doing, let me take that back so we can kind of look at it. It's actually giving you a little bit more of a stylized effect. It's still continuing to push that exposure and kind of brightening up those edges, trying to create an HDR-like effect. If you've already gone through that HDR process and you don't want to add any more stylized effects, Clarity is going to be quicker about coming in and adding just those mid-tone contrast enhancements without stylizing. And one thing that you do have to worry about with Topaz Adjust is as you have these really high contrast edges, you'll start to see slight haloing. Now, if you push it really far, you'll see it start to see it. But even with these slight kind of adjustments, you'll start to see just around these edges a little bit of a glow happening. Now, you can kind of work with that very easily by coming into your details enhancement within HDR and say process details independently. And then you can also come into your adaptive exposure where it's actually the technology is taking place. And instead of having more high adaptive exposure where those halos will start to really appear, you can take that adaptive exposure down and just take some of those adjustments out to kind of control those halos. But again, it gives you a more stylized effect more than a more natural effect that you might be after. Let me cancel out here. Let's go in and talk about going through the process of actually tone mapping first and then going into Topaz Clarity. Let's take a look at this image. So this is a good image because we're having a few problems here with the exposure that I want to deal with. And I know that taking this into Topaz Adjust and kind of giving it a pseudo HDR type of an effect might help. For example, these areas of the rocks on the right here, definitely my shadow areas are blocking up, and I could definitely stand to open those up to get a little bit more detail in this area and on the side of this pier. And then down here at the lower area, I'm losing a little bit of the detail that I want here in my rock and the sand area, and maybe a little bit in my cloud as well. That's not too bad. But I think I could improve it first by going into Topaz Adjust and then taking it into Topaz Clarity. Let me go ahead and open that up, or do a background copy, and I'm going to go into Adjust first and do a quick tone mapping. Here we go, reset all. And I'm going to stay in my HDR collection because it just kind of seems like a natural choice here today. So I'm going to just come down and maybe say something like medium pop grunge, see what happens. Okay, here's before, here's after. So some things are happening here that I like, and there's some things happening here that I don't like. I really like that it's opened up this area, added some nice detail enhancement in here, definitely opened up the side of the bridge, and it has also given me some really nice detail and color within this lower area. For me, it's done a little too much, and I want to take it down just a notch because if you see along this bridge, because you have that really high contrast, you're starting to get a glow. Let me scroll in so you might be able to see that a little bit better. Here's before. No glow along those areas. And now here's after. It's just real slight, but it's absolutely noticeable. And to me, I think that kind of just gives away that you're, or I'm personally, I'm pushing it too far if I have that glow. So what I want to do right now is just take that glow away one or two ways. First, I'm going to say, let's see if I can say process details independently. Okay, that helps. Let me show you that before and after. Here's before. It's just and I'm just keeping an eye on the pier itself and the glow around that. I'm just, oh, that was the color. Oops. I say process details independently one more time. Just takes that down a notch, but it's still there. So now what I'm going to do is take out some of my adaptive exposure. As I take that out, I'm going to lose some of the contrast that I had added in with the local exposure. So I'm just keeping an eye here. Here's before, here's after. It's looking pretty good. Still having some issues, but take my regions down maybe and my adaptive exposure up. There we go. Okay, here's before. Here's after. So again, I've opened up these darker areas, put a lot of more detail and color into this lower rock area, and done some pretty nice things to the sky. I still feel like I'm getting a pretty big glow. So what I'm going to do here instead is keep all the detail enhancements. Here's before, here's after, and I'm just going to use my local adjustments to get rid of it. And these are just several different ways that you can deal with some of these problems that arise when you're working with trying to get that pseudo HDR type of an effect. So what I'm going to do here real quick is say brush out. I'm going to take my brush size to about, that'll work. My opacity, I'm going to brush the entire thing out. So I'm going to go to 1. I'm going to keep my hardness down pretty low, and I'm going to take my brush size up actually, and I'm going to keep my edge aware at 1. If I keep my edge aware at 1, what I can do is I can take this brush and go in and remove the effect of Topaz Adjust, what it's doing, to the area that I keep the brush crosshairs right in the middle of the brush on. So I can selectively come in and adjust based upon the color that my brush is actually working on. It's very quick to be able to come in and do very precise controls. There we go. I just want to make sure I kind of get all of the out of the sky, all of the adjustments out of the sky on the left-hand side. So over here on the right, down here in the little mask thumbnail, you can see just exactly how quick I can go in between all of these different little areas underneath the pier, get very intricate in between all the slats on the sides, and completely take away that problem that was arising because I wanted to get this HDR effect. Let me show you this before and after. So now I'm just going to press OK. So I'm pretty happy here, but I still want to add some effect, and I want to add some other things within Topaz Clarity that are just going to enhance this type of an effect. And when I go into Clarity, I no longer have to worry about eliminating anything based upon the possibility of a halo or artifact coming through. So I'm just going to take another background. I just made a background copy of our adjusted layer. We're hopping on into Clarity. I'm going to press Reset All. And instead of worrying about any of these collections over here, there's just several things that I want to do. I want to go ahead and add just a little bit of mid-tone contrast, especially with this rock and everything like that. I think it'll be really helpful. So I'm just going to do that. Maybe a little bit more. All right, so now that I've added the mid-tone contrast, what I have noticed is that it's starting to block up this black or these rocks again on the side. And I want to just open that up just a little so I can come down to my tone levels, which is really something you need to know about when working with Topaz Clarity. You can come in and just take that black level up and reopen up those shadow areas, getting your shadow detail back, but still getting a nice pop of contrast. Here's before. Here's after. You can also take your white level down, adding a little bit more detail into your light areas as well. Here's before, here's after. I'm going to take my micro contrast up just a touch. Here's before and after. So we've definitely added some pop and punch into this image to kind of finish it off without having to worry about adding in any of those artifacts that you might have to worry about somewhere else. Here's before, here's after. Last thing I'm going to do, because I have some people saying, well, what about that really nice blue sky that happened to this image? What if you wanted to keep that but not the halo? Well, you can come into Topaz Clarity and work with that as well, because we have a hue, saturation, luminance filter within here that separates your image into 8 different color ranges. So you can come in and work with those color ranges individually. So with the HSL filter, when you open it up, you have your hue, saturation, or luminance. And you can just work on it like that. I'm going to go ahead and work on my saturation and just work with my blue color and see if that will bring that back. Ooh, definitely does. I'm going to take that down a notch. Okay, so here's before, here's after. What I don't like with the blue enhancement, I don't like the reflection of the blue off these rocks, so I'm just going to go into my masking tool here. I'm going to go to my color range. I can go over this here in just a couple minutes too, but I'm going to go into my color range and put it on this blue area of the rock that I don't like the reflection happening. And you can see over here in this top right, a mask is going to be generated based upon where I put this little green dot that showed up when I went into this color range mask area. So if I put it, let's say, on the blue of my sky, it's going to start eliminating the blue that I added in my sky, and you can see that again up in this top right area. But I want to put it on the blue of the rock, and it'll just take that away. So now I'm going to increase the blue of my sky, come down to my color range mask options, and I'm going to take the size of my mask that's being generated down so it won't mask out any of the sky beneath the negative space underneath my pier, and it'll just be focused in on those rocks. I'm also going to take the sensitivity down just a little. There we go. And I'm going to press OK. Let me show you this mask before and after. Now, it might be a little too subtle here, but here's the blue down here on the right where I didn't like it, started to feel like it was an unnatural thing happening here. And then I just took that out. So now it's back to this subtle blue, the natural blue that's being reflected from the sky itself. So all together, here are the adjustments that we've made. Here's before, here's after, added some punch, mid-tone contrast, especially bringing out the sand, the rock contrast, still allowing this shadow detail within the rock and the side of the pier. And I'm going to press OK. And it's just a really nice finishing touch to the tone mapped area that we began with. I did not resize this image, so it's taking just a second here, straight out of the camera. So there we go. Let me show you before and after for the entire image. Here's before and after. So the ability to really get a lot of the exposure adjustments done happened within Adjust, but the ability to add in a little bit of that mid-tone contrast back into those areas that got adjusted happened within Topaz Clarity, and it happened in a very natural way. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and I hope that you can see the benefit of clarity within your HDR images. Definitely let us know what you think about it and all the mid-tone contrast enhancements that you can quickly use with Topaz Clarity. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.